everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
The melting Arctic zone and how that opens up vulnerability in terms of China and Russia to have new access points, as well as fight over new sets of commodities and resources in that region as well.
Absolutely. One is understanding strategic competition. How will climate change affect our strategic global competition? This is particularly acute in the Arctic area, where you're going to have the melting of sea ice, which is opening up new sea lanes, which is creating more engagements and interactions, as well as implications on current economic arrangements and activities, as well as it will have environmental impacts and direct effects on society in those areas.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show.
I'm joined by Dr. David Alexander, who is a Senior Science Advisor for Resilience, and Kathleen Kenyon, who's Prize Competitions Program Manager at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
David, how do rising temperatures affect the U.S., and why is extreme heat a silent killer?
Yeah, so those are great questions. And I think it comes back to, there's a lot that's not readily understood about the implications of climate change. Of course, rising temperatures definitely will go to the traditional understandings around melting sea ice, which culminates in rising sea levels. What is less understood is that rising temperatures lead to an exacerbation of other risk and extreme weather conditions, one of those being extreme heat events. What is less understood by the public is that extreme heat events are actually the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the country, in the U.S. Most people associate extreme floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, but what's not understood by the broad public is that extreme heat events actually translate into more loss of life, as well as health conditions and mortality issues, and then those other traditional natural disasters.
Well, I think, most of us have seen the news over the last certainly few years, and certainly the most recent summer. It has been incredibly hot in certain regions. Of course, some of that has sparked wildfires, but just, the loss of, in cases, power that is supporting AC units, for example, is endangering people, let's say, especially the elderly, people that have, just kind of underlying disease or issues, for instance. And when they're packed in high density environments, like a urban environment, and you don't have AC, you don't have any way to cool yourself, it can become very dangerous very quickly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you need to understand is that when we have extreme heat events, it affects the infrastructure, it affects critical service providers, as well as it affects the general public. As you noted, you could see a loss of power, which cascades into a disruption in services, both public health services, electricity and power services that can cause outages in terms of losing AC, air conditioning, particularly supported by conventional systems. But it also affects those that are going out and providing those critical services that can't escape the heat conditions. Either it's the first responders and critical service providers that are going to be out in the field no matter what, or it's vulnerable populations like the homeless, as well as other disadvantaged groups that will be more vastly exposed to the conditions. So one of the questions we've asked ourselves at Homeland Security is how can we stimulate innovation against those types of circumstances so that we can provide new innovations or new technologies that not only address first responder needs, but also could be applied to citizens and public and services to the homeless, And then at the same time, how could we enable more effective and resilient solutions for our critical infrastructure and our residential units that people are relying on when those types of events occur?
Now, I think for the listeners, they're probably asking the question, why is DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, involved in this particular scope of issues? Because shouldn't this fall under HUD or maybe the state or maybe local government, for instance? And so talk a little bit about strategically from a security perspective and defending our country, why this is important.
Yeah, so perfect question. A lot of people don't understand that FEMA resides in Homeland Security. I think there's a much greater understanding by the public on the traditional law enforcement security missions of the department and not those other important missions around disaster preparedness and resilience to all hazards and all threats, particularly by state and locals, by the general public, and our businesses and support service partners across the country. So in that vein, you start to understand why is it important to DHS. At the same time, since it's important to DHS, we've done something recently, which is we issued a new strategic framework for addressing climate change. And that framework is really driven around leading resilience and adaptation to changes in the climate risk landscape. What's interesting about that strategic framework is that it looks at a variety of vectors that climate risk is intersecting with that will have significant implications on the nation's homeland security. One is understanding strategic competition. How will climate change affect our strategic global competition? This is particularly acute in the Arctic area, where you're going to have the melting of sea ice, which is opening up new sea lanes, which is creating more engagements and interactions, as well as implications on current economic arrangements and activities, as well as it will have environmental impacts and direct effects on society in those areas. Other areas that it will impact is demographic trends. You will see a movement and a migration of people, a shift in terms of a movement in migration of our sea life. So it affects not just our society, our people. We will also see migration changes in our flora and fauna, which can impact the way pandemics occur, the way bioagents are transmitted within and across the globe. And of course, increasing extreme weather events and sea level and other cascading concerns will also directly affect our aging infrastructure. And then we'll have threats from emerging technology as we look to innovate to address the climate risk challenges. So that kind of puts it in that larger security, resilient, strategic context.
Well, I have to tell you, it is profound, and the areas that you cover in terms of the vector is absolutely amazing. And of course, we've had on our show different people that have pointed out the Arctic concern that you've just laid out, for instance. And then just prior to this interview, we've had a guest that's been talking about human history and the movement, migration of people because of climate-related aspects. And now you're talking about even nature, and as wildlife, for example, let's say certain types of animals that carry certain types of diseases start to intersect because they're coming closer and closer to human population, becomes problematic. So there's a ton of issues. And of course, going back to FEMA, I mean, just last year, I think there were over 100 plus different types of disasters. So FEMA is stretched thin from a resource and manpower. This is becoming a huge issue because it's diverting a lot of resources from the federal and the state level. Let's get into this new prize competition on climate change that DHS has announced. The challenge is, I guess, designed to help find groundbreaking cooling solutions to counter extreme heat facing communities across the country. Can you tell us more about the Cooling Solutions Challenge?
Yeah, thanks. I think the prize itself is really aimed at countering extreme heat And, we looked at it from the perspective of how do we get really interesting ideas or solutions, or even like people that have life hacks about how to counter extreme heats. Perhaps they're cooling their houses, or they're figuring out ways to cool themselves. So the prize competition is, and now we're accepting entries until February 24th. We extended it about 2 months ago to get the best solutions, the best ideas out there. Our thoughts were, let's find cooling solutions for 4 areas: helping first responders, helping individuals, helping households, helping general populations that might be either vulnerable or displaced because of natural disasters. So we're looking for great ideas, great solutions, and those 4 categories. The grand prize is $50,000, which is pretty good. And we have 2 stages of the prize. So you get a great idea, submit it. The first phase is each winning entry gets $5,000, and then you're automatically advanced to the next stage of the prize for a chance to win $50,000 first prize, $20,000 second prizes, and then those 4 categories I mentioned, $10,000 each. So we're really open to seeing where we can get at people who might have inventions, or they thought about something, or they do something to really consider some interesting ways to cool down general populations. So I've seen some entries about like fabrics or air conditioning systems don't really tax the environment already, and we're looking for more of the same. So that's kind of where we are with the prize competition. Entries, we're looking until February 24th for those entries to come in.
Well, I love this, and I love the fact that DHS is taking a crowdsourcing approach and really trying to activate the collective action of the people and the citizens. That's very exciting. And just to kind of help the listeners understand a little bit, and those that are interested, can you talk a little bit in terms of the kind of this, the way you're going to filter out the winners? In other words, it's one thing to have let's say a wearable or device that's individualized, something that's on your body or near your body, but to think in terms of maybe like an infrastructure, something that is much larger scale, new forms of energy storage, new forms of energy transmission that can help cool something, so I'm just trying to understand kind of the scale of what is realistic, what's feasible, and what is DHS ultimately looking for.
Yeah, so I think in some respects, the prize competitions allows for a lot of latitude. It allows for people to think about new ways of cooling general populations or households, individuals, or first responders. So it could be something obviously close to someone, like a first responder that's responding to a wildfire and cooling he or she while they're basically trying to put out the wildfire. But I also think it's like life hacks too. There's going to be some ways out there that people like who live in Arizona, who constantly face extreme heat on an ongoing seasonal basis, and how they can counteract that. So the gamut is really pretty wide open, which is the nature of prizes. We don't want to necessarily limit people to be creative. We want them to be inspired by this prize competition and think about really unique and interesting ways that they can help counter extreme heat, help their neighbor who may not have air conditioning. A lot of cases we're seeing that the extreme heat is affecting part of the United States that normally doesn't deal with extreme heat situations and don't have lots of temperatures and don't have maybe air conditioning in their homes, or they might be elderly and not able to figure out how to retrofit their homes to condition them well, or even afford that. So we're looking at a whole gamut of solutions. So really any idea is a good idea.
So I guess my question is, I'm sure there's going to be a myriad of responses and creative solutions that's going to come back, and I think a lot of those scientific solutions to some extent kind of exist already. The issue is going to be not so much of evaluating on the basis of ideas, but commercialization. So what is the role that your organization will play in terms of actually taking that idea further to a point where you can actually start to commercialize and scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we're going to have a lot of judges from the interagency that talk about climate change and extreme heat to look at the entries we get. But one of the things we do that is a little bit unique with our prize competitions is we always have a set of mentors on board who are from business accelerators or in the innovation community that really understand how to get partnerships with manufacturers, how to create a business, how to look at intellectual property, and they really help them to take that idea or that solution and build upon it and figure out how to get it into the commercial marketplace. And I think that's really a key element of our prize competition program, that we pair the solution winners with those mentors in the business world or in the scientific world that can really help bring that solution to fruition.
I want to go back to David. You mentioned earlier that the Department of Homeland Security and the Science and Technology Directorate has created a framework for really looking at climate change in a very systematic way. So this is one challenge or competition out of potentially many others that's going to come out. What are other climate change related efforts that are either underway or that will be announced in the near term?
Yeah, so the department has actually issued a strategic framework, and it identified some core areas that it wanted to drive action. Why don't I highlight those core areas and then talk a little bit about how S&T is supporting the department in its action plan. It's looking at empowering individuals and communities to develop climate resilience. Clearly, you can see the nexus there to the cooling solutions challenge and extreme heat. Building readiness to respond to increases in climate-driven emergencies, incorporating climate science into strategy and plans and programs, investing in sustainable and a resilient DHS, and ensuring that our workforce is informed on climate change. So there's a variety of actions that are being taken by the department. One is that the department's announced that it's launching a new climate professionals internship program so that we can recruit and bring in climate professionals and build our climate literacy across our key missions and areas. Other ways that the department and S&T are contributing is, of course, we have our prize competition. We also have a strategic partnership with the interagency through that is managed by the National Science Foundation, called the Civic Innovation Challenge. In that upcoming challenge, which will be formally announced in a few weeks, the Civic 22 there will be a track focused on working with civic partners. In this case, it's working with our state and local communities and connecting them to researchers with ready-to-field solutions against different climate risk factors that are most appropriate for that state and local partner to address. And we will be making awards and then following a similar approach where as they submit their proposals and prove to us that they have ready to field solutions and their partners are ready to deploy, then they would have 1 year to demonstrate those outcomes. We did this in 2021. We did this focused on the broad disaster resilience topic, and it was so well received. We got such creativity, and it's a way to mainstream climate resilience into our local communities that we decided with our interagency that we would come back in 22 and do a track focused on climate change. So that will be upcoming. And then we are also working with FEMA on topics, for example, and by the way, my partner here, Kathleen, is involved in this, where we were looking at how carbon offsets and the emerging carbon markets could contribute to achieving our intended objectives and outcomes in building climate resilience. Could these be leveraged by DHS with its various programs, or could DHS become a catalyst for our state and local partners and infrastructure partners? So a lot of creativity going on. looking at a lot of different perspectives and innovation approaches. And then in the climate series, as Kathleen noted, this is intended to be a series. So this is the first topic out of the gate. We expect to work with the Secretary's office as well as our interagency partners in FEMA on putting out future solicitations that will be, to be honest, directed at similar prominent concerns. We have a heavy concern around wildfires. You brought this up. So we will be looking at ways that we can drive an event around wildfire innovation. And then, of course, we'll probably look at a few other natural disasters as well.
Well, I am so encouraged by the seriousness and the creativity of the leadership and just the overall entity and the S&T to really foster and support these programs, and working with the civic communities, the local communities, I think is the right way to do it. And of course, from our perspective, we love to see the startups and the innovators come into play where we can really start to play out into the commercialization. I mean, I think if the mitigation and the adaptation solutions can become even a fraction of the budget of what FEMA is already spending on wildfires and everything else, floods and hurricanes, it can have huge impact, and actually you end up, still being able to reduce the overall costs. Now, just to wrap up here, Kathleen, for those that are interested in learning more about this particular challenge, where can they go to seek more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So our prize challenges are always announced on our Homeland Security page, our prize competition page. So that is at dhs.gov. And then all prize challenges across the federal government are announced on challenge.gov. It is really easy to apply for this prize challenge. It's simply an email, a 3-page discussion of your solution and how it meets the criteria we laid out in the prize rules, or video. We want to make it really easy for people to submit their ideas and their solutions to us.
Well, I certainly hope that our kids participate in this as well as everyone else. And we, of course, invite everyone to participate and be part of the solution. With that, I have been joined by Dr. David Alexander and Kathleen Kenyon at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate. Thank you and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.